Hey, I'm MBS, and I want you to be more ignorant. And I know that makes no sense whatsoever, but bear with me. Because I know at the moment you're thinking to yourself, no, 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 Michael, you don't get it at all. My job is to accumulate knowledge, to become wiser, to become smart, to become more expert in the work that I do. And I'm not actually against that. But I want you to sit with the power of ignorance for just a moment. And let me explain why. I'm inspired by this little book. It's called Ignorance: How It Drives Science. And Stuart Firestein, the author, talks about the importance of ignorance as a key component for the ongoing progress that science makes. And he actually says this, and I think it's true for science and it's true for life, is that often our knowledge gets in the way of us making progress, our certainty that something is true. And he starts off by telling the story of ether. You've heard of the ether. It was invented by the Greeks. They're like, I don't know what's out there. Let's call it ether. And then as physics progressed, they're like, well, we know light travels through the space, but how? It has to travel through something. Let's call that ether because we might not be able to actually track it down or understand it or identify it or find it just yet, but it's out there. We just haven't got the technology or the tools, or we just haven't figured it out yet. We haven't looked in the right place. And it wasn't until 1907, the early 20th century, that a scientist went, you know what, I've been doing tests on the speed of light, and I can utterly not find this thing called ether. Does it actually exist? It's kind of, the famous story about the king's clothes, the child going, I think the king's naked. The scientist is going, I think physics is naked. Ether doesn't seem to exist. And in fact, he went on to win the 1907 Nobel Prize for Physics for an experiment that didn't work, which is I can't find ether anywhere. And the power of that is just, within 5 years, Einstein stepped in and came up with his extraordinary deductions around how light travels, how the universe travels, the power of relativity. That was able to happen because of somebody owning ignorance and removing an assumption that we all had. Now I know you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but all right, that was 120 years ago. We've moved on since then. We're not going to make a rookie mistake like that again. Well, here's the thing. This thing, the tongue. My bet is that you know that certain parts of the tongue have sensitivities for different types of tastes. There's sweetness at the top, bitterness at the back, sour, salty. And like me, we were brought up kind of going, that's the way the tongue works. It's an amazing organ, kind of designed to find the nuances of how taste works. Turns out that is completely untrue. But as insight that keeps showing up in cookbooks and taste books and scientific manuals, we just can't shake this falsehood. Here's actually what he says in the book. And I love what he says it. Almost everybody believes that the tongue has regional sensitivities. Sweet is sensed at the tip, bitter on the back, salt and sour on the sides. Picture of tongue maps continue to appear not only in popular books on taste and cooking, but in medical textbooks as well. The only problem is that it's not true. The whole thing arose from a mistranslation of a German physiology textbook by Professor D.P. Hennig, who claimed through just anecdotes that the tongue more or less slightly might have different sensitivities to different tastes, but it's just become the established fact, and we can't shake it, even though science tells us we're wrong. Now, this is science. You might be thinking, yeah, but I'm not a scientist. I'm like, that's true. Well, maybe it's true. You're not a scientist. But we do live in a world where we love our certainty. And I wonder if it might just be worth stopping and pausing for a moment and asking yourself, what do I think I know is true, but I'm not actually quite sure of now that you ask me? One of the powerful coaching questions that I often sit with in a place where I'm feeling either too sure or not sure enough is I go, what do I know to be true? What do I know to be true? And what happens is two things fall out of the distillate. There is the data, the facts, and then there are all my opinions, all my judgments about the facts. And it always turns out that I have very few points of data, and I have a vast number of judgments and opinions and interpretations and just general kind of points of view on what might be going on. Ignorance, it turns out, is the topsoil for curiosity. And curiosity is a powerful and underutilized leadership force. Curiosity allows us to figure out what we need to be working on. Curiosity is what allows us to come up with the best ideas to solve that problem about what we might be working on. Curiosity allows us to meet the person across the table from us and see them as whole, human, messy, brilliant, complex human beings rather than a label. Curiosity, it makes life better. And what allows you to stay curious is embracing ignorance. If you picked up a copy of my best-selling book, How to Begin, Start Doing Something That Matters, well, there are additional downloads and templates and videos you can get at howtobegin.com.